We'll get to more phone calls coming up. Update our poll results. 877-3DP Show. J.C. Tretter, former center with the Browns and the Packers, former NFL Players Association president and chief strategy officer. At least those were former titles because he has decided to step down. Why are you stepping down, J.C.?
Yeah, I feel like I had nothing left to give the organization. I feel like as a player, I sacrificed the back end of my career and I sacrificed time with my family. And I did those for the players, and I would do them again. I love working for the players. In the last 5 weeks, I feel like I've had to sacrifice my public reputation. There's been some stories out there about me that aren't true, and I've been asked to sit on that and not talk about it. And that was for the organization. That wasn't for the players. And in the end, I feel like I couldn't do that anymore. I've always said the only thing I've ever wanted to care about was being a great dad and a great husband. And once this job wasn't fun anymore or hurt my family, I was out. And it happened both of those at the same time. And it was time for me to leave.
So Lloyd Howell Jr., the former NFL Players Association executive, has decided to step down as well. Be specific on what you're talking about that is not true that's being said about you.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of narrative spun. The idea that I buried the collusion grievance. I've never seen the collusion grievance. I don't have access to the collusion grievance. I wasn't in any discussions about the collusion grievance, just not part of my job. The idea that I've been angling for the executive director job since I was a president, also not true. I was asked to run for executive director during the last search. I declined because it would take me away from my family for too much. And I wanted to be with my kids. I've got two young kids. I love watching them grow up. There's been a story about us firing an arbitrator that said it was because of me. I don't fire arbitrators. That's legal's department. I don't do that stuff. So a lot of things had been rolled down to this must be JC's fault. And that's not where I sit in the organization. And that's not the type of person I am. And I didn't want people thinking that was the type of person I am.
ESPN reported last week that Howell struck a confidentiality agreement with the NFL 6 months ago, hid that from the players, and that was a January arbitration decision, finding that the league executive urged team owners to reduce guaranteed player compensation. When did you find out about that collusion?
I know we lost the collusion grievance in January. That I knew that. I didn't know of any agreements or what was happening with that because it's not part of my department. Once it leaked a few weeks ago, I started learning more. I was on the board call and the EC call when it was explained what had happened over the last 6 months to the players. So I know more now, but at that point, I knew nothing. I wasn't involved in the discussions.
There's a quote where you're saying something about Russell Wilson not getting a guaranteed contract with the Denver Broncos. Would you elaborate on that? Is that a accurate quote?
Yeah, so that's the thing about being deposed. They get your phone, they read all your text messages. It's not comfortable, but those are all facts. So what had happened was when I retired, I actually did an interview, and I talked about. They asked about guaranteed contracts, and I said the next best person to get a guaranteed contract is Russell Wilson. I thought he was traded for assets similar to Deshaun Watson. He's a former Super Bowl winner. The team can't just let him leave. They have a lot of pressure on him. They also have a cash-rich owner. There was a lot of things in his favor to get a guaranteed contract. When he did not get a guaranteed contract, I texted D and I called him a loser, and I called him a wuss. And I was upset in that moment because I felt like we were missing an opportunity to get guaranteed contracts. We had Kirk Cousins get one years ago, and no one came behind him. And then I was worried we were going to have the same thing, and we were going to miss an opportunity for players to get guaranteed contracts. That was before the collusion grievance was launched. That was before the idea of collusion had come up. Months later was when we launched the collusion grievance, and that's why in my deposition they asked me about it. And I said, if I knew the league was colluding against Russell, I would apologize because I would know there was factors outside his control that were illegal and not allowed to happen. But I didn't know that at the time I sent the text message.
Do you think that owners have been colluding on no more guaranteed contracts?
I can only know what was in that report, which is the arbitrator found that the league encouraged teams to collude, but the arbitrator did not feel like the NFLPA proved that the teams acted on that recommendation and that there was no damages that we could prove either at this point. Now, this is still pending. So even though it was, quote, hidden, it was in a standstill agreement. and the right to appeal was still there. So the NFLPA is appealing. So this is still open and could potentially change. So this is still a pending investigation or a pending matter. And I hope it comes out, or I hope it's proven that we are able to prove those other two pieces that are needed to win the entire collusion grievance.
But don't isn't there a public record of the owner of the Chargers and the owner of the Cardinals talking about guaranteed contracts for their respective quarterbacks?
Yeah, everything in that collusion, we can talk about what it looks like and then what the findings were or what the arbitrator ruled. And I think one of those is what's the public messaging versus what's the actual findings. And the actual findings as of now is that they wasn't found that they were colluding. That is still under appeal. And I
Okay.
think the hope is that that changes when it goes to a three-judge panel.
J.C. Tretter, former NFLPA president, chief strategy officer, and of course, former NFL player. Some of these other things with Lloyd Howell Jr. ESPN reported that he was sued for sexual discrimination and retaliation in 2011 when he was an executive at another job. Um, Strip club, going to strip clubs. I don't know who went to the strip clubs. Why is the NFLPA doing business at strip clubs? And were you aware of the sexual discrimination or the retaliation with the former head of the NFLPA?
We were aware of those during the search. We brought up those that came out in the background check. We asked him questions during the interviews, both with the executive committee and at the final board meeting. We asked him directly about those. He explained his side of the story, and the board was comfortable with his answer, and that's how it proceeded. When it comes to the strip club, I was not there. I've never been to a strip club. I don't drink. I don't do anything in that realm. That should not have happened. I wouldn't have done it. It should not have happened. I'm not going to talk about who else was there. That's not my business. I was not. And that's a bad
But
look.
is it a business meeting at two different strip clubs? Like, I'm trying to understand. And the fact that he charges it to the NFL Players Association, correct?
Correct. That was the story. I do not condone it at all. I do not think it is right. It should never have happened. It should never happen going forward.
How do you think players should feel about the NFL Players Association now?
This is not where we wanted to be. When we launched the search years ago, we were looking for an executive director that was going to be here for 2+ terms. That's like 10 years. That did not happen. So this is not part of the plan. I think what's the most important thing for the players right now is to understand that this is their union. The players need to come together. They need to find an interim to lead in the time being, and then they need to find a search to find somebody that is going to lead them going forward. And this is not the timeline we wanted. We wanted a longer runway going into the next CBA. But these are now where the chips have fallen. And I think the players need to take a very hard look at the organization about what to do moving forward and find the person that's going to come in and make this organization what they want it to be. Because in the end, the players are the most important part of this. That's who leads this. That's who this is all about. And the players need to dive in and take care of it.
What's the feedback been from current players over the last couple of months?
I mean, this is also a weird time in the schedule where a lot of guys are away. So I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to the news. I've heard from a lot of guys in the last couple of days as they get back into locker rooms and start talking. I've heard a lot of disappointment for me leaving, which I appreciate. Again, I've told them I've loved working for the players since I became president. It has been an honor, and that no matter what happens, I will always be there for them, because that has been always my motivation is just doing what's best for the guys. And that was one of the toughest parts about leaving, was I feel like I lose opportunities to do work for the guys. And that's sad. It was a very emotional weekend for me, and I finally woke up with some clarity of this is the best decision for me and my family. But I'm always going to be sad about leaving the organization because those guys do a ton of work, and I understand what they go through and what they put on the line and what they deserve. And I really want them to get what they deserve.
Speaking to a couple of people involved in this, and they said there's just a lack of transparency. That it felt like that even when you hired Howell, that it was kind of cloaked in, it was a clandestine, shrouded in secrecy type of thing. How much of guilty of lack of transparency? Would you say that's a fair assessment of the Players Association?
I mean, if we go back to the search process, yeah, you can say there was a lack of transparency to the outside, right?
Okay.
But that's not exactly who we represent. I don't think we owe the outside transparency. I think we discussed it as player leadership, what the search process should look like. We had two previous search processes that weren't good. So it's not like what we used to have was a great option that bared great results. Wasn't true. So we did something different that the players voted on unanimously, and we executed exactly what we as players decided. And that decision was we wanted the players to make their decision without outside interference telling what they should make. And we did that. And in the end, you are judged by your results. And the results were not what we wanted. Again, we wanted somebody here for the next 10 years. That did not happen. So I think when they launch their next search, they should have a discussion learning from the mistakes of the two previous searches, but also the last one of what they want to change and what they want to do different. No search is perfect. I think there are changes needed, and I think they will figure out what exactly they're looking for and grow from those. Um, but yeah, I think the transparency is an issue that we talk about of what needs to be known. Again, I have frustrations now because you have two sides of the coin. One of, well, let the public dive in and get to know these candidates and share what they've found out about them. Um, but I look at my situation where there's been a ton of stories out there that just are patently not true. And that's not fair to people. It's not fair for somebody with an axe to grind to put out information that isn't true and bury someone's reputation and impact their standing amongst the union. So there are different ways to look at what people should be able to share information on. And I think the guys will end up making the right decision on how they want to run it going forward.
But I'm also looking at this report ESPN had in May, the FBI investigating the financial dealings of the NFLPA and the Baseball Players Association. This is a multi-billion-dollar group licensing firm, One Team Partners. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here. You're chief strategy officer, and it feels like nobody knows or knew what was going on here.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on the investigation one. I'm not at the organization anymore in that capacity, so I'm not going to speak about it. I will say
But
what I
that's
know.
ongoing. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And we have outside counsel looking into it with a group of players looking into it. And that's the important part, right? We have active players who are on a committee to dive into these issues and evaluate all the issues because in the end, it's the players' union. And the players have to know what's going on. And the players deserve to know what's going on. You're right. And that is a problem. And the players need to get to the bottom of it. And they will. I'm confident they will.
When are we going to 18 games?
I don't know. That's a CBA issue. So whenever
But you
that
guys have
CBA,
had discussions for a while about this. So are
well, I
there
think I,
concessions that you're asking for the players?
um, no, not at this point. Again, I think Rogers made it clear. Anytime the microphone gets in his face, he brings up 18 games. So I think he's been clear about what they want. But in the end, they can't unilaterally impose that. That needs to be something that's given in a CBA negotiations, and those haven't started, and those probably aren't going to start for a while at this point with everything going on. And in the end, that is a major, if that is something players are ever willing to give, that is a major give that damages players, hurts them bad. I know Roger went on a long list of things recently around sharing costs and lowering cash payments and more international games. Those are all things that are really bad for players. And I think players shouldn't rush into a conversation when the other side is listing off a long list of demands that are really bad for them. We have a CBA until 2031. There is no need to rush into those negotiations. If they want to have an early discussion with the players, then they should have a list of things of why it's good for the players. And I haven't heard a reason why having an early negotiation is good for the players at this point.
Should the players trust the commissioner?
This isn't a shot at his character. He works on the other side. There's labor and management. He has bosses that are not the players. He has interests that are not the players' interests. So you probably should not trust the person who negotiates on the other side of the table because he has other interests besides that. I think the players need to find a leader, an executive director that they do trust and they want in that room to negotiate on their behalf for their best interests. That is how unions work. You need a leader of that union to represent the players' interests, and you trust that person. You don't trust the person on the other side of the table.
I ran into Jim McMahon in Tahoe, and he's in bad shape. I think there was thought that he might lose part of his leg. And I said, well, but don't you have health benefits? And he said, no. So why doesn't Jim McMahon, help me understand this? I mean, do you get it for like 5 years and then that's it? You're done?
So there's a couple different ways. I think one, we've talked about lifetime health care forever. That's been a conversation for 25 years, probably longer at the union. The issue is that is not an option because no one is offering lifetime healthcare. To get lifetime healthcare, you need an institution to give you lifetime healthcare, and there is nobody willing to offer it. No one's willing to take on that risk, no matter what the payment is. So that's the reality. So the next step goes, how do you get insurance to players? What we have right now is if you vest, you get 5 years post-career health insurance. You also build up an HRA account. If you map those out, you can build up some insurance for a while. What we need to do is find other ways to supplement the insurance coverage until we have an institution that is willing to give us lifetime healthcare and we have the money to pay for it. Because again, that is part of the revenue split. Everything comes out of the revenue split. So if we wanted lifetime healthcare and we could afford it, it would come out of whether the salary cap or other benefits. But right now, that is not an option. So I think one of the important things of the union is going through and figuring out how to give coverage. We have disability benefits. We have we have HRA accounts. We have post-career healthcare. We have a bunch of different things that if you stack up the right way, you can have coverage for a long time. But it's not as clean as just like a single plan that lasts forever.
JC, thanks for joining us. Good luck.
Absolutely. Thank you.
JC Tretter, former NFLPA president, chief strategy officer, and of course played in the NFL.